I mean, I knew this decade was going to be a difficult one for all of us. But damn! So hey, for those of you out in the civilized world, if you have friends in the US, particularly women, please check on them. We're not okay. Hi folks, if you're new here, I'm Cypris, and usually we talk about magic, nature, thrifting, and living with cats. This is not a political channel. I loathe discussing politics, mostly because so many human beings are more worried about whether their team is winning than they are whether laws and policies are just, good, and equitable. But sometimes what politicians are doing deeply impacts human rights. And that's where I just can't keep my mouth shut. My platform is small, but I would be sticking my head in the sand if I refused to raise my voice when I have a personal connection to what needs to be voiced. And for the health, well-being, and foundational humanity of everyone, but most especially women with wombs, it's my responsibility not to be silent on this. If you're living under an even bigger rock than I am, here's what you may not know. On May 2nd, a Supreme Court document was leaked. It was only what they call a draft opinion, meaning it's not yet going into law, but what it reveals is that the Supreme Court is deliberating on how to overturn a fundamental legal precedent in this country. And by fundamental, I mean from the 1970s, not 1780s. And that is our constitutional right to access legal abortion. I'm not wanting to get into the arguments for or against. They are out there for anyone with enough sense to read and evaluate their source material. I have no desire for my platform to become a verbal battleground, and comments that serve that debate will be deleted. This is not where we contest bodily autonomy, or whether a fetus counts as a full human being, or whether the existence of a fetus should cancel out all other related factors, medical, psychological, or financial. This is not the space to make your case. Scathing comments and attacks on social media sway no one. What I am going to discuss with you today is my personal brush with this topic, and why and how that affected my perspective on the issue. People, speaking of the mob, not necessarily individuals, learn about and understand their world from stories, from personal accounts, exponentially faster and more deeply than they do from exposure to facts or science or generally data of any kind. We are just primates, after all. I haven't told this story to many people, largely because I don't have that many close friends, but also because these are the sorts of traumas that are not supposed to be flayed open for public opinion. What I'm going to tell you about isn't a particularly unique story, and I am very, very lucky in the fact that for me, actually driving myself to a clinic and having to make that unthinkable decision never fully presented itself. But what I went through was terrifying enough that it changed my relationship with, my awareness of this topic. And just a quick clarification. I am reading a script. When I communicate organically, cohesion can be a bit messy. I've always been better at organizing my thoughts, especially heartfelt ones, if I can take the time to get them out on paper first. So please don't take my use of a teleprompter as in any way disingenuous. I'm not editing my truth. I'm trying to articulate it. Okay, here we go. Shit. This is way more personal than I like to be in the public domain. But for what it's worth, here's my experience. Longtime viewers will know that I was raised extremely conservatively, but over time I had to part ways with old ideologies. And it was in my early 20s when I had learned enough about the world and about medical science and about ethics that I knew I didn't know enough to be deciding for other women how and when to make that call. But personally, for me, I didn't think I could ever make that call, should a problematic situation arise. Hypothetically, should I find myself in that family way, either through a marriage turning toxic or an even worse interaction, I would be stuck with a life, a future I couldn't bear, but would have to. And that would be that. Yet one more single, impoverished mother is eroded to dust, depleted to an unlived life and early grave by the overwhelm of parenting without the help of partner, tribe, or finances. Oh well, and shame on me for thinking that man was a decent human being. Yeah, my bad. Obviously. Now, as life went on, and that naive starter marriage did in fact implode with toxicity, I was very fortunate in that there were zero progeny from that ill-conceived union. Turned out, I had no biological urge to Xerox myself, and neither did he. Whew! Totally dodged a bullet there. I tried one more time to cohabitate with a member of the Man Clan, but I was still naive enough, I just didn't know how to vet him first. This one was even worse. An actual freaking sociopath. Yes, admittedly, that's my own diagnosis, but I read articles. Bottom line, he was cruel, a bully, and he was gaslighting me. I was taking notes on all of our conversations just to verify to myself I wasn't losing my mind. And you're asking, Cypris, why didn't you just get out? Oh my God. If you know, you know. If you don't, take my word on this. A man motivated to control a woman and to crush her psyche can do a lot to make it unsafe for her to try to escape. And that's the position I found myself in. Getting out was absolutely what I needed and wanted to do, but it took me 2 years to do it. And even after I escaped, he continued to aggressively stalk me and left manipulative and hateful messages on my phone for many months. For about a year, no one could leave a message for me on my phone because if I deleted his messages, he would immediately completely fill up the inbox with more incoherent ranting and personal attacks. This was a man who once grabbed me while I was asleep and threw me across the room. I woke up being hurled through space. So that's the context. I was living with this man, trying to organize an escape plan and trying to keep him mollified in the meantime, trying to keep the temper tantrums to a minimum, which means, bluntly, you put out even though you don't want to, even though it feels dirty, even though it feels like every time he's breaking your soul into slime and ashes. For the sake of keeping him from getting angry or punishing you, you submit your body to him and keep him thinking everything is fine, even though every single time he can't or won't finish until he knows it's hurting you. Now, this man, overconfident in the way typical of narcissists, made no secret of the fact that he thought making a baby on me would trap me permanently. Even suggested paying me if I could provide a male heir. I shit you not! His motivation on this idea and his willingness to perform sneaky manipulations were strong enough and consistent enough that I was concerned he would tamper with my birth control. I started hiding it and counting it. I was desperately trying to hatch and organize an escape plan while also trying to make sure he wasn't finding a way to impregnate me against my will. Good times. Okay, are you still with me? Here's where this is relevant to what's happening in our country. As I said, I had never once considered myself capable of making that unthinkable decision. But here I was, in a situation where there was absolutely no way I could allow myself a pregnancy. If that man had succeeded somehow and impregnated me, I would never be so cruel as to let that unborn soul be subjected to him as a parent. I would not be able to protect a child from him. He would have legal parental rights. I could try to run, sure, but how could I get away with no resources? And if I ran to family, how would he not eventually find out and sue for legal access to that child? And I would be doomed to a life that tethered me to that man. I would be forced to live near him or completely abandon my child to him. I would spend 20 and more years worrying about the psychological damage he was inflicting on that innocent soul that I couldn't do anything to prevent. The only option was to stay childless at all costs. And so, I found myself in a position where I had to consider this scenario as a possibility. I had to face in myself that I was capable of making that call, because sometimes euthanasia is the kinder course of action. And it was at this point, too, that I imagined what my situation would be like should I become pregnant and not have access to medical assistance. There would be only one real solution at that point. I was amazed at how simple the choice would be should all the walls close in like that. I think the bottom line for me is this. If you push a woman into an impossible position, she will end up making an impossible decision. And obviously, I did get out of that situation, and obviously, it has left its scars. Fortunately, that was the worst of it. In a perfect world, we would not have to talk about all of this, because it wouldn't be a thing. But we live in a chaotic, cruel, messy, ugly world. And there is no way we can make that world a better place simply by outlawing the last resort. We have to fix the problems that create these situations in the first place. Women don't get D&Cs because it's the laziest option. There's a mountain of personal and societal problems that funnel women to that point. My experience was freaking lucky. But for so many women, the problem isn't a hypothetical one. I have friends who have had to make this choice. The situational contexts that bring women to this choice are heartbreaking. We can't always predict how to avoid abuse, or being taken by force, or being so destitute financially there is no possibility of successfully raising a child to escape survival poverty. We can't legislate away the fact that sometimes medical issues make a baby unviable. And there are thousands and thousands of scenarios that we're not even touching on. The only humane way to minimize the number of unwanted pregnancies is to minimize the factors that force people into such a situation in the first place. And so, our nation has one more reason to grieve, and a reason to get up and fight, and speak up, and protest, and vote, and do everything we can to promote a kinder and more educated world. Again, to beat what should be a dead horse, outlawing sensitive medical care is not championing the innocent and vulnerable. It is making war on the innocent and vulnerable. So, for whatever it is worth, or not, that is my experience. I truly never wanted to blast my personal humiliation on the internet like this. but this is too important an issue to remain silent on. If there's even a chance that hearing my story can contribute to someone taking half a pause in their evaluation of this subject. And because visibility of the issue matters, it's much harder to avoid facing the complexity of the problems if you keep having to see them. So, there you go. A self-flaying of personal, private history on the altar of human rights. Thank you for listening. Thank you even more for not lashing out with hate comments. And I promise the next video will be back to more fun content. Oh, and yes, I dyed my hair. I'd be more excited about it, but the world's looking like a giant shithole right now. Alright, on that note, keep fighting to make the world a better place, and keep it wild. Oh.